All right, everything is good to go. So we could jump off. So I'll just do the quick intros and then we begin. I just want to confirm the link is showing. Okay, the YouTube link is showing. So, hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of Crypto Mondays Caribbean and Africa. However, this new series is switching up a bit. It's um it's now under our franchise known as Phi.Nomenon, and Phi.Nomenon is a strictly compliance when it comes to Web3 and AI. Sorry, let me just allow Palesa in. So, Phenomenon is a series that deals with the regulatory and compliance aspects in emerging technologies such as blockchain, Web3, and AI. So, moving forward, our events under Crypto Mondays Caribbean and Africa are going to be under the Phenomenon franchise because we're also going to be doing real life events and corporate trainings and all kind of things. So, Devon, you know how to do the whole spiel about, the trading aspect. You'll do that spiel towards the end. But yeah, so welcome everybody. Palesa, let me just pin you to the screen right now as well. And let us start. So, first of all, big up everybody in attendance. Uh, Today was supposed to be a hybrid event in Lesotho and then streaming virtually as well. But Lesotho has a public holiday, and in the UK, we also have a bank holiday, and I think it's Memorial something in the US as well.
Yes.
So yeah, so we just decided to do a virtual event, and then next month we potentially will be in a real life event in Lesotho or in Barbados, but we'll give you confirmation as we go by. So the topic today is simple and clear. It's blockchain meets AI. And in this room, we have Evan and Sara, who are practitioners and academics in this area. And then we have Devon, who's a risk management specialist, and Palesa, who's a legal tech attorney. And we are going to try to pick each other's minds to just understand where this whole thing is going. Now, following from the previous event, uh, there was some difficulties in terms of people understanding what blockchain is in theory and what AI is in theory. So I'm going to request the panelists to like try give us that sort of 101 aspect, but not too academic, and then we go into what things are really in practice as well. But before all that, our introduction today is going to be a bit unique. So we know the three of you, we've all met you before, but the audience also want to know your motivation as to what really brought you into this industry. So before we start, let's start with your introductions and your motivation to be where you are today. We could start off with Sara.
Hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Sarah Johnson, and I'm super happy to be part of this amazing panel in great company this morning, as usual. My motivation, my origin block here, it really started with a stint that I did at the Dutch Central Bank, where I was one of a team of two that was entrusted to look at digital currencies at the turn of the century, when the euro was launched. And I was at that time still in university, and I had this great opportunity to really learn about this nascent technology that was blockchain, and blind signatures and their use in banking, in central banking. So that was really an eye opener for me, because I thought lawyers, went to law school because they didn't like math, and all of a sudden I rediscover math and the computational magic that applications of math to technology to finance could have. And since then, I've been a great fan.
Thank you, Sarah. Evan.
Yeah, well, it's been a long journey
I was introduced to computers and the internet fairly young in the 90s. And, it's kind of just been along for the ride since then. I consider myself a futurist, somebody who is looking for emerging technologies that are game changers when it comes to, the world and society and economics. So, this is a passion, a long-term passion of mine. I've been involved in AI since around 2016. I've trained neural networks, mostly sort of in the wargaming sort of sector, real-time strategy games, and I even did a little bit of training for Bixby, which is you may know Samsung's AI. So this was back in 2017, and I was one of the top ranked trainers for Bixby for a while when they were doing that. Obviously, blockchain is, a deep passion of mine as well. And I've been, on that whole ride for quite a few years, really trying to explore where it can take us. And I think, AI is in so many ways more of a game changer, really. Not necessarily in positive ways, but, you know, a door closes, a window opens. It's something to be pragmatic about, right? And I think it's important that we really kind of discuss a lot of the implications of this and what it means. And, I don't know if we want to wait for that to go
Yeah,
on.
let's
So I'll
wait for
let
that.
you,
Let's
yeah,
wait for that,
sure.
Evan. Let's not get too
Absolutely.
excited at this point.
Right.
Devon.
So for me, one, when it comes to technology, anything that's related to technology, sometimes it can move fast paced depending on the momentum, right? And I just feel like it's a sense of responsibility working in the space that I work in to ensure that one, it remains ethical, two, that certain policies and certain parameters, whether that be controls or whatever, don't fall by the wayside, right? So I think that's where my motivation is because one, I get to not only learn along the way, but I get to add value along the way when it comes to how we see certain technologies like artificial intelligence or blockchain. So I think that's really the driving factor for me. It's just understanding that, hey, I readily accept this responsibility. I want to be an advocate for it. And I want to make sure that, we not only see the good side of it, but we see the potential bad sides of it as well. So
Thanks, Devon. And we have our very own Palesa.
Okay, hi everyone. I hope you can hear me. I feel like my network is a bit slow today.
Yeah, it's a bit erratic, but you could press on, really.
Okay,
Yeah.
wow, the question. Mm. Okay, for me, basically, why I ended up being at this site, I have so many reasons, but one of them is that in my early university years, I ended up finding myself in being introduced to cryptocurrency, basically. So I actually fell in love with the idea of being able to make money online, like how is that even possible? I can invest in something online and all that. So later on, after graduations, I realized that, well, it's a very sad feeling that our market in Lesotho, especially the legal market, is actually so suffocated by a lot of unemployment, you know. So I later on got to be in this wonderful cohort that introduced me to legal tech. Um, and then that's where I met Brian. And from there, he took me to No Ting. And that's where I actually fell in love with the intersection of law and technology. And that has been a wonderful journey for me. And knowing that now I'm in the position to like have my cryptocurrency, my love, and then the law, working together.
Mm.
It actually brought me to a point where I'm actually right now like advocating for regulations of cryptocurrency in Lesotho. So yeah, basically that's that. I have a whole lot of things that actually brought me here and I'm loving it. I should just say that.
Thank you. Thank you, Palesa. Now let's get right into it. So I know Sara and Evan, you guys go into the depths and depths of blockchain. So I don't know who between you, but let's say ladies first. Sara, do you just want to take us through what blockchain is from your basic understanding, and then help those who have intermediate knowledge to see how it can be applied in the real world side of things?
Yeah, so I'll be the sidekick of Evan on the AI side, talking about blockchain. So you have to think, when you think about blockchain, really the magic is in the word, right? So it's a distributed, decentralized ledger. So it's a way of memorializing, timestamping data. So and collecting data in a system that is not appropriated by any central power, but a network of computer. So, I use this very simple metaphor on how blockchain works by analogizing it to a train. So a train to move around needs a rail system, and that's the payment rail system. So the actual cryptocurrencies. And in that sense, to what Palesa was saying, crypto can be used as an exchange, can be used as a method of exchanging a value, but it's also used as really the mechanism by which data and information is uploaded onto a system. So it's really the rail. And then the train itself is made of the blockchain, of the ledger, where data is uploaded. And when you think about uploading data, think about, depositing luggage onto the train. And inside the luggage, there could be either fungible or unfungible, non-fungible tokens, meaning there could be tokens that are related to currencies, which are fully fungible. Anybody can own the same token at the same time, or related to unique assets. And so non-fungible tokens and smart contracts. And once they're uploaded to the train, well, there are a few things that needs to happen. First of all, you need to pay a ticket for the right to ride the train, and those would be the gas or other fees that gets paid to the system. And then, you get a timestamp for uploading that data, that information in that specific, part of the train. And that would be your ash, and it would be your memorialized, depository timestamp for that data to be uploaded. And then the train keeps on going and never stops, but every so often receives a new compartment. And that's the block, right? So after you uploaded so much information, the compartment gets full, and then you needed to add a new compartment and a new block of data. And depending on the type of rail that you are uploading this data to, so either Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever else, you need to abide to a certain rules. So if you upload data into a Bitcoin payment rail system, then you have proof of work type of rules of engagements that needs to be followed. So, you have a system of approval of the data that is based on computational power, whether if you upload the data and information to an Ethereum-based, is proof of stake. And so you have to have skin on the game. You have to have a certain amount of, ETH to participate to the verification of the data, to make sure that the data can be uploaded. So different rules of engagement, different systems and rules for participating to the blockchain data train, so to speak.
Thank you, Sara. Now, Evan, Sarah has kind of laid the tracks for you. So you interact with this every day. I met you at a blockchain conference, Evan. This is your day in, day out. So take us through your perspective on what the blockchain is and what it does, or what you
Sure. Well, yeah,
perceive it to
yeah,
be.
and I think Sarah did a great job at explaining it. I think in a very, maybe simplistic sense, it is a distributed timestamping network, right? So it's distributed, meaning there's no single party that controls the network, right? Or the information itself. And it's timestamping. So each event that occurs, there's a record that is made that is, unchangeable, it's immutable. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's a very important sort of way to ensure that there's integrity in the accounting of transactions. So no one person can change anything. It's all, publicly available and verifiable, and that really kind of is a game changer when it comes to the internet, where effectively copy and paste can be done, at will. There's no sort of way to have any kind of singular, permanent sort of object in on the internet. But with the blockchain, all of a sudden you can have things like tokens or NFTs that, these are very particular things that can't just be copied and pasted, right? So it brings a sort of an aspect of material permanence to cyberspace. Um, and of course, with the networks, there's many different types of networks now, and many different types of sort of algorithms that back these networks. But one of the nice things about, say, proof of work is that, when you were talking about cyberspace and all this sort of ethereal things, proof of work is, heavily dependent on real technological infrastructure. So, computer processing chips, energy, all these things that are tangible and sort of anchor this sort of ethereal digital realm in the physical space of the world, right? Versus, say, proof of stake, which is a little bit more, just you just have to have so many coins to be a validator or something of that nature. So, there's many different sort of ways that this is done, but effectively, they all try to, bring about a sort of an immutable way of recording events, right? And then, of course, as Sarah was mentioning, you can kind of encapsulate data in those events, right? In those transactions. So it doesn't have to necessarily be monetary. It can be information. And that's really important when we talk about artificial intelligence, because, how do you ensure data provenance? So how do you make sure that the data that's you're feeding into your LLM is the correct data, is the accurate data, isn't been tampered with? And so, when we talk about the blockchain and AI, I think this is a very important aspect of it, the immutability, the verifiability of it. It all sort of plays into making sure that the data is sound. But then there's more to it as well. So I don't know if you want me to dive right into that. I don't see you.
No, we'll go. Hello,
Okay.
Evan. Can you hear me? We'll go
Yeah,
into
I
the
can. Okay.
nitty-gritty moving forward. So my
Okay,
my
cool.
question and the question everybody must be wanting to understand, even in industry, is you've mentioned some significant attributes of the blockchain, but there's always some kind of backlash in the industry. So what makes this blockchain so special? And I know I keep exchanging messages with Sarah on LinkedIn, showing her like there's some academics who are always hating on the blockchain, and you're like, this is a scam and all this. So before we
Right.
pass over
Yeah.
to Devon to discuss the risk aspects of it, Sarah or Evan, could we just tackle this whole thing and lay to bed now? Like, what makes the blockchain so different and attractive? I understand it's not a silver bullet solution, but some people tout it as a silver bullet solution, and some backlashes, the critics are like, it's all a scam, So I leave
Yeah.
it in Sarah or Evan to take it. Sarah, you want to start?
Well, okay, so a couple of things, couple of thoughts. So first of all, I'm a great believer that any technology, even nuclear energy, to make this example, is good, right? If it is used for what it is meant to be used for. On the other hand, the people that invent this technology, the humans, are fallible individuals, and therefore the uses that we make of even the greatest technology could be for nefarious or not so great purposes. So, to follow what Ivan was saying on the data purity or, on the provenance, I really do believe, it's fantastic to have a system where you can timestamp paradoxically forever, the provenance of information, however, garbage in, garbage out, it's the quality of the information and the veracity of the information that you input in this paradoxically forever memorialized system that is absolutely integral to maintain, the system itself. Therefore, if you use technology for your own greedy, maybe politically weaponized, goals, you will get not so great results. And the fallibility and the vulnerability of human I would say behavior is that where things kind of fall apart. And then before I pass it on, I want to make a comment on something that Evan touched upon that I thought is fundamental. One of the beautiful things about blockchain is its transparency, right? So I can actually go into the Etherscan and see where my bitcoins are going, even though when they're stolen, right? I can see the wallet, I can see the public key, I can follow it around. It's completely transparent, it's distributed technology. On the other hand, one of the things that it's interesting about AI, it's the epistemic opacity. We really cannot, at this point at least, open up the hood and really look at the internal workings of how the LLM really reaches certain output. So even if we can control the data, at least for now, we can control the data because really, completely autonomous agentic system actually now they can go out and grab data themselves or utilize data in their own way, which creates all sorts of problems about training data with fake news and things like that to that point. But is this difference epistemological, philosophical things between blockchain and AI where there's transparency versus opacity. And I think things get a little bit more complex as we go down that philosophical path. But I just wanted to insert that.
Thanks, Sarah. Evan, did you want to chime in before we move to Devon?
Yeah, absolutely. And what Sarah was mentioning was excellent. And it kind of brings me to a very sort of important point. And that is that AI, I think, fundamentally is more dangerous to human civilization than the invention of the atomic weapon.
Evan, hold up. We're moving to the AI argument after we,
because
we want to unpack everything step by step.
It's not an argument, but it's a point I'll make that ties it in with blockchain here.
Okay.
And that is, fundamentally, this is a very powerful tool that is going to, disrupt, huge swaths of society and everything, right? Civilization. But blockchain, and like Sarah was mentioning, we can't really see under the hood of a lot of this AI stuff. Blockchain is a way that we can kind of put a leash on it. And I think it's very critical and almost like they're symbiotic. They're meant to be together, in my belief. But yes, fundamentally, this is a very dangerous tool that is going to disrupt everything that we know of and how life is conducted. But yeah, and really we need to be ahead of it. We need to be making sure that there are the safety guidelines, there are the technologies to keep this, at least transparent so we can see what's happening with the data and how the data is being manipulated. Because AI, I don't know if you've ever heard of like a cyclotron, right? The cyclotron was like during the Cold War, the sort of the attempt to manipulate the human mind using technology, right? And this is, effectively what AI can become, maybe already is. And so, how are we able to make sure that what we're receiving, the information we are receiving, how it, the media, through everything that's being sort of pushed through AI, how are we making sure that it's not, pushing us in ways that are going to be negative for us? And blockchain, I feel, really is that leash that we can put on AI that can kind of make sure that it's, we can have some kind of handle on it.
Okay, thanks, Evan. Now, Devon, let's move swiftly to you. Evan has made a very good point, and right after this, now we're going to start unpacking what AI is and its consequences. But in terms of blockchain and Web3, Devon, what's your take on things as a risk expert, as a GRC expert, rather, governance, risk, and compliance expert?
So first of all, the dialogue so far has been great. They basically talked about the beauty, and I'm going to talk about the beast of it, right, a little bit in context of risk, because Evan provided a great segue in that particular space. So I would say the main factor here is irreversibility of trust assumptions. Basically, once data is written to a blockchain, it's immutable. That sounds like, strength until it isn't. So from a risk perspective, I would say um, we've been talking about it so far. It's bad data, in equals permanent consequences. So if fraudulent, bias, or erroneous data is entered, there's no undo button, right? All, AI models or smart contracts built on flawed blockchain inputs will make flawed decisions at scale. And then when we talk about from a security perspective, security is only as strong as the smart contract code. So most breaches or fraud in blockchain aren't, from breaking the cryptography, they're really from exploiting poor logic in smart contracts. So once deployed, those contracts execute automatically. Malicious logic can drain funds or expose systems before anyone even notice, and that's a major concern, right? I would say some other factors, just from a risk perspective, is the governance side, right? Governance can't keep up. Decentralized systems often lack clear authority for emergency interventions, protocol upgrades, dispute resolutions, or even legal enforcement become complex when no single party is in charge. And then just from a regulatory perspective, there's a lot of gray zones areas in that particular space, right? So global blockchain deployments often have cross jurisdictions that creates gaps in accountability, auditability, as well as enforcement, especially for GDPR and financial compliance like AML, KYC, and AI fairness. So just a false sense of security sometimes is what really derails that, I think. From a risk perspective, many assume blockchain equals secure, but the chain may be intact while the application and user interface, or like, let's say, off-chain data feeds may be compromised. So these are just some of the risks that we can identify. But again, there's the beauty aspect, but there's also the beast.
Thank you, Devon. Now, before we move to AI, Palesa, we now come to you. We want to understand your position in Africa, Lesotho. What sort of challenges are you facing in terms of Web3 and blockchain for now, before we move into AI?
Okay, thank you, Brian. Currently, our challenges are that, of course, the first one is that a lot of people still think that blockchain is only about cryptocurrency. They're not seeing the technology as is, but they're always thinking it's about cryptocurrency. So now that we've always had a problem with cryptocurrency where a lot of people have been scammed, especially Basotho people. Now, they don't trust cryptocurrency at the moment, although there are some like younger generation, which is actually getting to know more about cryptocurrency, or they're actually um, interacting with cryptocurrency. But as for other people, when you talk about blockchain technology, they always think it's cryptocurrency. They don't even want to hear what this technology can do and just take off the cryptocurrency part of it. So as of now, now that we still don't have regulations, a lot of Basotho developers still skeptical into like with interacting or maybe developing on blockchain technology solutions for our community. Because they're like, even if we develop anything, the very fact that cryptocurrency is not even recognized as anything in our country and we don't have any regulations for this space, we don't feel very protected with our work. So hopefully with time, basically with time, we're gonna be okay and we're gonna get there. Um, I'm really happy with where we at right now, and in the next year, not even many years, in the next year, because technology moves so fast, I believe we'll be talking about something very different.
Thank you, Palesa. And just to chime in on what you said, I don't think it's an African unique problem. I think this whole blockchain is crypto and crypto is blockchain thing, it's a global thing and people just don't get it. Like people just don't get it. So with time, we're going to move. So now we're now under AI. So we're going to go back to Sara and Evan to take us through what AI is. And then later during this session, now we're going to bring them together and see what potentials they have as a unified front. So Sara, back to you in terms of the AI discussion.
I'm not going to do a great favor to Yvonne here, but so my, for what I understand, AI is not new concept. We had AI since 1950s, and really the idea back at Dartmouth University, going back then, and Alan Turing, it was really to ensure that there was a way for human to interact with computer that was seamless, literally, what I call it, speaking English and getting English back. So if you think about it from a technical perspective, it is really still difficult to understand blockchain because, you need code. You talk about code language, and blockchain lives and breathes with code. Whether artificial intelligence, which was a name that was made to distinguish this line of study from cybernetic and from computer sciences, was really trying to see if there was a way that you could have a computer good enough to interact and mimic human way of communicating and thinking. How do you get a computer to think and communicate back as if it's a human? And that's really the gist of the Alan Turing test, where there's going to be a time where a human judge is not going to recognize that is actually interacting with a computer. And as per crypto, that goes through winters and summers, times where a lot of people put a lot of funds and money into the technology. So AI, right? sort of through the years from the 1950s to 2022 and ChatGPT, there's been times where, and AI technologists will tell you that it was really difficult to get any money and any funding for any type of AI studies, and times where they had leaps of technological breakthrough that actually attracted more investments. And I think that really it's with the advent of the NVIDIA of this world and the ability to get high GPU powers connected with high storage at low cost and high, sophisticated algorithm, this trifecta put together that really brought up the invention of ChatGPT, which is this interactive chatbots, where I would say it's an agentic system on steroids, right? So you don't just have an artificial intelligence clever system that follows rules, such as a driving car or a thermostat, but actually interacts and has some kind of self-agency in answering back. Still statistically driven, so I would argue, and maybe Devon is going to tell us something different, but that at this point at least, is still simulating the prompts and is still, looping back to the human agent, but maybe soon to be agentic, like truly agentic, as independent. So I don't want to take too much time from Evan, but
Thanks,
I will leave it like that.
Evan?
Yeah, really well said, Sarah, and yeah, great overview. I think, yeah, I mean, what you just said, it's simulating human consciousness, right? Like that's the whole concept is this is, artificial, right? It's artificial intelligence. But when will it become not artificial, right? That's the big question. And I think it's kind of there's a really deep sort of rabbit hole there. And obviously that's been discussed in films and books for probably close to 100 years now, right? I mean, to a degree. But I think whether it was 2001: A Space Odyssey, with HAL sort of becoming sentient and locking everybody out of the space stores, or Philip K. Dick's book, Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, that became Blade Runner, and having to deal with these human-like synthetic replicants that are now running wild and free among the people on Earth. It kind of there's definitely a lot of thought that has been put towards where's the conclusion of this, right? And the dangers of that, frankly, because there's a certain danger that comes from being highly intelligent but unconscious, and that's what AI will fundamentally lack, that humans have, right? Is consciousness, right? The ability to feel pain, to know what pain is, or to be able to at least reason through pain. Whereas artificial intelligence, it lacks a lot of the sort of critical abilities necessary to navigate highly complex experiences, or planning, for instance. If we do start to use these systems within our governments, which is very likely, because of the fact that they are highly efficient. They doesn't need to sleep. It's practically immortal, right? I mean, theoretically, you can't, if there was an AI that went fully agentic and was running rampant on the internet, it would be almost impossible to destroy. And the fact that it doesn't eat, it doesn't sleep, it's immortal, frankly, right? It can learn, 10,000 times faster than you and I can ever dream of. These kinds of, things, once you start to think about it, can be quite intense. And so, there is a lot of ramifications of that. Like if we are using it in the government to, that where it will have a direct impact on millions of people's lives, decisions that it's making, maybe already, right? Like, do we even really know how much of the government decisions made by the United States now are being influenced by AI? I would think more than probably most people suspect. I don't know. I'm not saying that all of, there's an AI ruling the American government or any other government, but I do feel like if there isn't AI being used by the government right now, then that's almost like you're shooting yourself in the foot, right? Because of the how powerful of a tool this is. So, what we're looking at is, an arms race, an accelerated exponential arms race to utilize AI as much as possible, in order to become more competitive, more efficient, more effective, and at the same time, we're kind of like, putting ourselves at massive risk, but we can't afford not to, right? And I think even, a couple of years back, Vladimir Putin said it, where, the first country to reach AGI, artificial general intelligence, wins, right? Because theoretically, you if you had such a powerful AI, you would know all of your enemies, all the ways around your enemy's defenses, right?
Wow.
You'd be able to, you know, devastate them without even having to launch a missile, perhaps. So we're talking about very powerful technology here that we can't step back from, actually. Like it's a done deal.
Evan, today,
Yeah.
yeah, that was very thought provoking, and I think Devon is taking like five
Yeah.
cups of coffee after this. You know. Now, I just have a quick question before I pass it over to Devon. In terms of AI, you can see like Trump right now, he's gotten investments from the Arab world worth trillions of dollars. And in practice, in real life, I think the sort of AI is being used by governments somewhat more sophisticated as compared to the GPTs that everyday people are using. But
Right.
even in terms of the everyday usage, the GPTs that everybody is using also present some risk. Is that not
Sure.
correct?
Oh,
Is,
absolutely.
yeah. So, Devon, would you want to tackle that sort of point we're at where there's the more advanced levels of AIs that we probably have no idea about, and like the everyday AIs that also need a proper evaluation?
Yeah, so I guess let me break that down a little bit. So I would say from the complexities, I would say it really goes hand in hand with the sophistication on what you want to use it for. Like I'll speak from my perspective, like in my world, right? So um it's a great tool. And not only is it a great tool, but for the work for the work I do in the space of risk and compliance, it can not only allow your job to be more effective, but it can fill in the gaps that the human behavior is not really catching. But then on the opposite side of that, it can do the reverse. On the artificial intelligence side, there might not be things that a human behavior can actually identify, right? So when I say the sophistication aspect of it, they really need to be blended together to really be used effectively. Um, the way I see this and envision this in my space is because we have to identify emerging risks, whether that be risks that are currently in the industry, or let's say that we are seeing certain trending issues or incidents that are occurring in a particular space. Well, that's where you blend in the human behavior aspect with the artificial intelligence aspect. And the way you do that effectively is by, well, you program it to basically allow what you want it to do. So in my space, we have this, what we call like a risk register, right? It's basically a mechanism or method to allow us to keep track of all of the risk that has occurred or that might have occurred or that may can continue to occur in the industry to keep track of it. It allows us to rate it from the industry standard. Well, what's our risk posture? What is our threshold? What we won't allow versus what we don't. And when doing that from a human lens, that can somewhat be very exhausting because you're not going to catch everything, right? That's where AI comes in. You program it, you allow it to work effectively exactly how you need it to do. But on the opposite side of that, um, to Evan's point, the way we operate as compliance and risk professionals really allows us to see it from a human lens because when you're doing a proper investigation of certain things, you kind of have to go hunt for certain things, right? And that is where you have to have that conscious to tell you, hey, something doesn't seem right here, right? I need to go look over here. I need to go explore this space because this is what I saw over here. Well, um, AI could do that, but you don't want to rely on that. And that's the thing, because what we do has to be audited at the end of the day, right? You don't want to rely on mechanisms that are not going to give you that thorough review of something that you really need to analyze. So I would say when we're talking about the complexities and the levels, there's benefits there. You just have to have a clear understanding of what you want to use it for and use it for that only. Because once you start picking and choosing, hey, let me use it over here and not over there, the AI is learning you, right? Too. And that's an important factor I feel like that we haven't talked about, right? The more you use AI, the more it's going to learn you, right? And if you're not consistent with it, if you're not training it to really be effective, exactly how you like to use it with you, you're not going to get the best results. And that's when bad data comes in. So we got to be cautious of that as well.
Thanks, Devon. Sara, I'm going to come back to you in terms of AI data, the legal aspects of data, AI evaluations, and all that. Just take us through this because I think at the end of the day, data is what these tools rely on, good data, both blockchain and AI, they rely on good data. So what are the legal aspects and evaluation aspects of this?
Yeah, so I think it's bringing a step back for a second. So there are two lines of legal thoughts, and one is the ethical thoughts, which at a universal level we can think of the UNESCO principles for AI, and the other one is the actual legal governance around the acceptable uses of AI and thinking like AI Act, European style, and risk-based analysis of AI. So from a UNESCO perspective, so the ethics of AI, to go back to the preoccupation that Evan was talking about, and the possible usurpation of human agencies. So you start from thinking of the proportionality of AI agentism and the do no harm type of ethical questions, the safety and security, the right to data, human data, and the right not to have your data used. There was just a case in Germany whether now Facebook in Germany is going to be allowed to use user data to train their own AI algorithm for commercialization behavior for their own agentic systems, which is kind of interesting how the legal side went. And then the idea of an adaptive multi-stakeholder governance overlooking like a ombudsman, creating an ombudsman type of approach to AI systems where you have general human rights and then looking at AI agentic system through those lenses. And then you have the AI Act, and for the actual practical uses of AI, based on risk, which is really risk to the human well-being. Again, that proportionality and doing no harm, which is really interesting because it sets regulations and different regulations for the type of risk. So things that could really harm people, such as face recognition, and the use of AI, for example, for certain more work-based behaviors that is limited, whether more commercial-based AI agents that use consumer data is considered, less risky, and therefore, as long as the company has some kind of AI governance and some internal policies and can prove, that they are monitoring data and they're monitoring their own AI agent and chatbots, that is acceptable. But I want to go back to, again, that difference between the technology and human behaviors. We know, for example, in our legal, attorney world and planning world, how AI is used even in the court system, and how many lawyers have been abusing, for example, ChatGPT without supervising the type of quality of data that comes out, and being admonished by the courts for using cases that do not exist. And cases that there was a really interesting case out of the US, and I think there are over 50 cases that are now, being discussed in the US for misuses of AI by lawyers, misuses of AI by expert witnesses that are basing their own legal opinion for the evidence that they swear upon on faulty hallucinated outcomes. And then on the other hand, there are agentic systems that we use every day for reviewing legal contracts, that are, again, it's legalese on steroids, because it allows for rote, very boring, types of work that associates used to be doing, to be done not only at, speed of light, but with some actually perfection. So again, it goes back to the initial idea of how do you train the AI? Is it an open source world that is, potentially corruptible, or is it a closed world, high level of quality of data, that the law firm has based on precedents, based on things that they can control. So, and all fundamentally based on risk management.
Thanks, Sarah. Devon, I think you have a point to raise. And after Devon goes through his point, I'd just like to find out from you guys, because the other day I was watching a TED talk by Sam Altman, and there's this big debate about open source AI and like private trained AI. I think that's a big issue right now. But Devon, you wanted to chime in on something.
Yeah, it just kind of echoes a little bit what Sarah's been talking about, but there has been some good momentum and good energy here in the US when it comes to AI. As I look back to, I kind of wish we had this same type of synergy for crypto. Obviously they viewed it as very volatile in that respect, but just last week, there was a proposed 10-year federal moratorium on state level AI regulations in the US. And just for context, so the proposed 10-year federal moratorium at the state level regulation originated from a provision within the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And basically, this was just a comprehensive budget reconciliation package passed by the US representatives back on the 22nd. And what was key is that this provision aimed to prohibit states and local governments from enforcing any laws or regulations around governance AI models, which is great, or automated decision-making tools for decades following that bill. Now, the rationale behind it was that the moratorium is to basically establish a unified federal framework for AI governance, thereby preventing a fragmented landscape of state level regulations that could potentially hinder innovation. So they're really trying to get that cohesion where we're all on the same page at a state level and beyond, which I think is great. Now, moratorium sounds like a cooling off period in my perspective, but innovation doesn't wait, right? And neither does risk. What we're really talking about here is the fear of regulatory fragmentation. But I want to be clear that absence of rules doesn't create an alignment; it creates loopholes. If we delay state oversight for decades, we don't get progress; we get patchwork with risk exposures, as we've been talking about. And I believe in tiered governance. So let the federal playbooks offer consistency, but give states that agility to respond in real time. I think it's going to be key. We don't need regulations that chill innovation. We need regulations that clarify lines between disruption and damage. And I think this is how we do that. So this is great momentum, but we always have to be aware of risk, even when we are talking about regulatory spaces as well. So,
Thanks, Devon. Now, Sara and Evan, do you just want to take us through this conundrum we have between open source versus closed source training of these AIs and what it means for the layperson?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot to be said there, right? I mean, open source AI, I think obviously it comes down to, I think, sort of a bigger battle, really, between the individual and the sort of, large corporate entities that have, tons of data at their disposal, huge amounts of money to fund the training of these AIs, and where does that lead, right? I mean, if you're looking at, for instance, right now, what, like, 1% of the world owns, of the global population owns, a massive proportion of the wealth. Just imagine what it's going to be like when these guys have, their own AI that's working for them, and being able to do everything that, a large corporation has done for hundreds of years, maybe, all of a sudden, just with 20 or 30 people, right? There's going to be a real sort of centralization of power among a very small technological elite. And I think what happens with that is what's going to, what hope does the little guy have?
Mm.
And I think that's where, open source can provide an avenue for the little guy to be able to have a stake in AI as well, right? And so that AI doesn't become this sort of, uh, tool of power over society by a very small minority. Instead, you and me and others can either work together collaboratively and build AIs that are beneficial to us, that allow us to have those same capabilities, that allow us to, reap the benefits of having these kinds of technologies, and maybe even taking it further, allows us to be able to protect ourselves in a sense, right, from the overreach of these other artificial intelligence systems. So, it to me, it's a bigger battle than just simple open source, closed source. To me, it's kind of like, how do we make sure that 99% of the human population doesn't get left behind, or just become subjects to this sort of totalitarian, nightmare of, of super powerful people with a lot of money and their own AI, right? That just is able to outcompete anything else. And I was a part of a project called Singularity Net by Dr. Ben Gortzel, and this was an early attempt at decentralizing artificial intelligence, right? Like kind of trying to make it so that everybody can participate and everybody can reap the benefits of it. Now it hasn't really, unfortunately, got to where the hope was. And I think if anything, right now we're kind of in a pretty bad spot when it comes to this stuff. There is no AI for the people right now. As much as we could say like open AI is somewhat what we have. It's really not enough. And I think the average person is at great risk of being left behind, being subject to the whims of very large corporations and their AI entities. And yeah, it's a bit scary. So that's kind of where I see it as. I'm not a legal professional, so to me, I take things very sort of more philosophically, more economic. And I think there, Devon has had great points there, right? Like talking about it very pragmatically, like this is how corporations incorporate these things, into their businesses and governments and whatnot. But I think that if we look at human nature, and if we look at like over the history of civilization, I think that there's more of a tendency to break the rules if there's huge amounts to be gained from doing so, right? Like every day, massive corporations, banks, they'll break the rules. They'll pay the fine, right? The fine's worth it, actually, right? Like they'll do things incredibly illegal, right? TD Bank was money laundering for the Mexican drug cartels, right? They knew they were doing it. They made a lot of money from doing it. They knew that if they got caught, they just have to pay a large fine. But to them, that large fine is only a small percentage of the money that they made by doing it, right? So the rules don't really work. The laws don't really work as much as we hope they would. The reality is, if there's an impetus, if there's a benefit to breaking the rules, they will be broken. And I think we'll see that quite dramatically soon, more and more. I think we're already seeing it so
Thanks,
much.
Evan.
So
Thanks, Evan.
yeah.
Sara, do you want to chime in on that before we move
Okay.
to the merger between the two?
Yeah, because Evan brings up a lot of really important things. And so, first of all, between open source and closed source, if so to speak. So I think that OpenAI is kind of like a little bit cavaliers in that, because they are under the spectrum of open source and open development, right? That's what they're at. They're saying if we leave it open source, if we leave it so that the data that we gather is really internet-based or global-based or universe-based, we're going to get a better technology. I think that's a very simplistic way of doing it. And actually what we could be getting is lower quality data because of all the bias and the fakery that is poisoning the net. And it's self-servient, I think, because what they're getting is free training of their LLM by users, right? Under the fact that it's open and you can just play with your chatbot. In reality, what you do is it's constantly training the algorithm for free and not knowing how much data you are giving up of yourself. And funny enough, you can try to see how your ChatGPT actually get to learn who you are And I have to constantly, retrain mine so that it doesn't bias back to myself, so to speak. So there is this idea of, we want an open source because we want development of the technology, but on the other hand, there is no control of the data, right? And there is abuse of data privacy regulation. And on the other side, on the closed part, there is the fear that by just using your own internal curated data, you're missing out on potential evolution of the data itself, right? So if you're, for example, training your AI on old cases or old precedents with old language, are you really helping your firm to be cutting edge and future proof because you're now working within a closed universe, right? So there is that internal, so again, there should be a call for revising internal data and updating internal data so that your own private algorithm is constantly getting better, right? So that's one thing. The second part, regulation, deregulation, should we even regulate this space? So I am completely opposed to deregulating this space, given AI or blockchain. I do not think we're going to get in a better world when nobody is actually trying to regulate it and walking and stepping away from anything and everything, because of the sheer power of the technology itself, right? So I am a great believer in vast regulation. So for the electronic, for anybody who is interfacing with the public, and allowing the public to play within the blockchain space, there has to be regulation of that, and there has to be AML compliancy. There has to be at least thriving to look for some kind of tracing of the money and making sure that we're not just helping the bad dealers of this world within a really great technological advancement and systems. So I am for regulation. The problem with regulation is, as we're seeing with the big beautiful bill, is that it's a power play and it's political. And unfortunately, not all, democratic and political regulations are the best for the technology. So I am a proponent of an integrated, technological regulation made by specialists. So yes, you have the democratic will of the people, but then you have within the parliamentary regulatory bodies, you have the interfacing and of the technologists, right? So you ask the people that are working within what is the best regulation and how should we go about doing it, and the users as well, right? And unfortunately, being a political representative sometimes doesn't go hand in hand with the actual users of the technology because of the advancement of these systems. So I am for deep fake regulations. I am for magenta system regulation. I am for regulation of using face technology. Because it goes to the privacy and the geotagging of the location of us as human beings. There is this idea of government surveillance, which is really true, that is brought into huge, the domain of AI and what that could do, especially when we're talking about misrecognizing people based on biases of the algorithm. So again, there is a difference between curated data for closed source that needs to be constantly supervised and upgraded, open data with all the potential risks that imposes to the overuse of privacy and customer data, and then there is good regulation that needs to be there as overarching set, and maybe we are not there yet.
Well, thanks, Sarah. So now we've reached to that point where we want to see how these two technologies play together. So, Evan, do you want to tell us how you see the two technologies playing together?
Sorry, blockchain and AI. So I just saw a comment come up that was directed to me, so I got a little distracted there. But are you talking about how
Well, basically the
blockchain?
merger, the new merger, blockchain and AI.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, so there's the one aspect that I kind of mentioned earlier, which was the data provenance aspect, which I think is very important. And obviously there are, as both Sara and Devon brought up, there's, major implications as whether or not the data itself is, accurate, right? Like, sure, you can put on the blockchain, but what is the quality? I think there are, obvious sort of, yeah, or not obvious, but I should say, ways of ensuring that the data that you're putting on the blockchain in the first place is of quality. And I think, data is basically the oil of the digital age, right? So, that is quite valuable. Quality data that can be verified is very valuable, right? Like Elon Musk didn't buy X or Twitter, whatever, call it X, because he wanted to help the world. He bought it because he wanted the data to train his AI, right? That's a gold mine. X is a gold mine of data, and that is really kind of and maybe another sort of panel or another discussion that we could talk about, but. So yeah, you have that one aspect, and the other aspect is the machine-to-machine economy, and that is all of a sudden, having AIs engage in business deals with each other, and using a native means of transaction on the internet, preferably to one that is able to handle, microtransactions, nanotransactions, often for data itself. So maybe they're buying and selling data to each other, or algorithms or whatever, right? And then paying for it using tokenized dollars or whatever happens in the future when it comes to money on the blockchain. Maybe they come up with their own cryptocurrency, right? Who knows, right? I'm not, hopefully not. That would be pretty, I think, wild. But maybe there needs to be some regulations on that. But I think to a degree, yeah, there's a lot that can be done with blockchain and AI. And I think they really can't, they will never really achieve their fullest potential without each other. So, blockchain without AI and AI without blockchain are, I think, a disaster, or maybe not a disaster for blockchain, but an unfulfilled promise. And AI without blockchain, I think, is definitely a disaster. Now, when will we see that integration occur? I think it's soon. I think there's just so much to be gained from it that you would have to be pretty like I don't think anybody that's high up in the AI game doesn't realize the benefits of blockchain to AI. I think it's there. They know, but they're not quite certain yet which blockchain. That's the big deal, right? Like, and going back to why this space gets so much criticism, with cryptocurrencies and, basically this highly speculative gambling that is the dominant sort of, activity that's being done in the sector. It's there hasn't been a whole lot of attention placed by blockchain networks on really trying to get into the AI game. I mean, there has been recently, but it's been still like kind of more of a speculative play, right? It's not been fully serious. And looking at the scalability demands, and all the other aspects that are necessary. You know, the ability to process, you know, billions of transactions per second that could incorporate large amounts of data, for instance. These kinds of things are very important for, you know, blockchain and artificial intelligence mergence.
Thanks,
And
thanks,
so those things still haven't come yet,
thanks,
but
Evan.
yeah.
Sarah, do you want to quickly chime in on that, and then Devon covers the risks, and then we start winding up gradually?
Yeah, so I completely agree with Evan was saying about data is the new oil, right? Absolutely. And I think that one of the things that we haven't touched upon is the idea of digital data as property, right? And there are discussions around the world and different jurisdiction over that exact thing. You know, is crypto property? Is blockchain a smart contract property? And what kind is it? You know, so is it obviously it's not real property, like it's not tangible. So is it intangible? But what kind of an intangible property? And could it be assimilated to some kind of like a right? You know, like an incorporeal right, such as, you know, similarly to copyrights or intellectual property rights. And how do you deal with that property? You know, can you enforce it now that you have a right to something? Can you enforce it, and how? You know, and that has led to an incredible, I would say, revolution within the court system, which generally doesn't quite move and doesn't quite improve very fast. Now we can have, you know, service for litigation and lawsuits by dropping, you know, NFTs or email services or, you know, injunctions over, you know, pseudonymous people by NFTs. So and injunctions, you know, there are international injunctions over this type of properties that is like crypto, or they are cryptologically based, because that's what crypto is. You know, it's a cryptographic type of property. So that means that you have to have two keys to get it, and it's super robust from a data privacy perspective. So we're still struggling around the world to find where does this type of data really fits in. And on the agentic side, it's so true. Like now, like, you know, if you go to Amazon, there is this new Amazon agentic buyer that has actually access to your credit card and can anticipate buying things for you based on your history, right? So, you know, where is the human, you know, even incentive to put a stop to these kind of things, you know? And it's not just Amazon, it's Google, and is you know, other AI systems out there that are putting these agents. There's built-in agents with access to our finance and to our behavior, to our online behavior, which poses all sorts of, like, you know, questions like, is the way that we behave and we shop really telling who we are? You know, are we really becoming almost economicus? And is there, you know, and that's reductionist view of us as consumers, instead of, you know, well-rounded human beings for other systems. And last piece is the way that I see it integrated in what I do. I'm an estate planner, so I deal with death and taxes all the time. Can you imagine having, you know, an agentic system that pays your taxes, or that when you die, you know, it does your estate, you know, on your behalf, or helps your executor to do it, and more realistically, more, you know, for today, having the ability of having electronic wills that get uploaded onto a blockchain. I never have to worry about, you know, losing my will, because there's always going to be a retrievable, you know, proof that I made one and its content. But on the other hand, how do I revoke it? You know, can I just send that old will to a burn address on the blockchain so that I know that it's being revoked? Or what if I keep on uploading new wills and they get newly time stamped? So there are interesting questions that I hope we are going to start talking more about, that we're going to bring up more and more, so that we create the technology and the technological resources and solutions that we want, and they are best serving us.
Thank you, Sara. Now we're going to move to Devon. Palesa, realized your network has been on and off, but you'll still be around for the Q&A. So, Devon, let's wrap up this whole discussion
Yeah,
in
sure.
terms of the risk aspects, and then we'll do takeaways and then take questions from the audience.
Yeah, sure. So,
Okay.
from my lens, before I get right into the risks, the coexist, excuse me, the AI and the blockchain being able to be coexisting and live in the same air, I think can be possible. Certain elements that we need to remember to make it happen is shared accountability. I mean, we don't talk about that enough, but blockchain gives you the ledger and AI gives you the logic. Together, they can create traceable intelligence if designed right, and that's the key. It has to be designed right. So use blockchain to verify AI inputs, log decisions, and trace changes over time. And AI enhances blockchain systems by detecting fraud, abuse, or model drifts. And then just risk-aware architecture is very key. Don't just automate governance, but smart contracts and AI needs safety rails, not just speed. So embed kill switches, oversight triggers, and audit layers to prevent any runaway automations, and just human in loop oversight. We've talked about that already enough. I mean, automation system still needs accountability. So supervision isn't a weakness, it's a wisdom. Now, getting into the core aspects of what this merger could look like and what it could create, I would say, again, the immutable bias aspect of it. AI is trained on biased data, which equals bad decisions, right? So on blockchain, those biases get locked in permanently. From a governance gaps perspective, who's responsible when AI and on-chain makes wrong calls? Without defined roles, accountability basically vanishes. Compliance blind spots, cross-border deployment, risk violations, whether that be GDPR, AML, KYC, or data residency laws, traceability over legality is a very much concern. And then finally, exploitable automation. Smart contracts triggered by AI can be maintained or manipulated by adversarial inputs or model hallucinations. So these are just some factors that we need to keep aware of if we really want this to coexist effectively. So
Thanks, Devon. So now let's do this. Let's wrap up with takeaways, and then we're gonna go into the Q&As, because this will also be posted as a podcast. So, Evan, let's start off with you. What are your key takeaways for this discussion?
Yeah, I think it's nice to really hear what Sarah and Devon have been saying, and I think, yeah, it's great to hear that sort of the risk assessment and what can be done to alleviate a lot of this. You know, I don't feel particularly optimistic that we will see these, a victory of the people and these sort of, regulations over AI. I think, ultimately the greed, I think, the sort of the technology itself, I think it's going to really wreak havoc on our sort of social, political, and judicial systems. I think we're kind of, I think there's a real battle there, no doubt. And I'm not trying to say that, oh, we should give up and not try, right? Like, but I feel like, uh, the likelihood that we'll be able to take this sort of model that we've built over the last, 100 years in terms of legal tradition, maybe a little bit longer in some countries, and try to, force it upon a rapidly changing technological landscape. it'll be interesting to see what survives of it. That being said, yeah, good regulations are super important, but there's going to be somebody who doesn't abide by them, and whether it's a nation state or our own nation state, our own government, or a private corporation, the boundaries will be pushed to the point where, by not continuing to push our own boundaries, we'll be left behind in a very vulnerable state. So it's a scary proposition. That's my kind of, I guess, takeaway of it all. I feel like, you got to fight fire with fire, right? So in this case, the best way to kind of control technology is with technology. And so I think that, we should be looking to incorporate sort of, whether it's blockchain, and I don't know, I guess we'll be answering questions later, but it kind of comes back to maybe the importance of actually, sort of decentralizing artificial intelligence.
Thank you.
And kind of giving the individual the ability to have their own, artificial intelligence that belongs to them and that works in their behalf, as opposed to being, just another, a subject of another entity, of a corporate body or a government, maybe, and that's where the decentralization aspect comes into, and I'll probably discuss more of that when we get to the Q&A.
All right, cool. Thanks, Devon. Sara, what's your takeaway from this?
So I completely agree, and I can't wait for the last point, because I had my own thoughts about data trusts, for example, for our own to protect our own data. But I think the takeaway, the way that I see it, is really like creating a culture of community based governance, so that we're kind of challenging each other on how and what is the best way to regulate the technology that we created, right? And before it takes over. Because there is already like a feel of some of these systems taking over, and some vulnerability, psychological vulnerability, how agentic systems and digital replicas, the fact that, do you really need human actors anymore when you can have their digital replica, and as long as they get paid, and is that sufficient? Is the royalty payment sufficient for using your persona in all these other movies and entertainment, and what's the right balance, I would say. So I think that we need to get together as a community, as international community, and really have more of this kind of conversations where different minds kind of get together and expose some of these issues, trying to make regulation afterwards, right? Because this is kind of the deal. The technology is already existing. We're already using it, and we're trying to figure out the way that we can put, goalposts and ring fence it. So that's the challenge, right? And to Evan's point, it's getting better and better every day, kind of leaving us behind. So those are good questions, and we have, I would argue, we have more questions than answers. But as long as we're posing these questions, we're also pushing ourselves into looking for better regulation. And I would argue that there is really no rights without remedies. So we really have to start thinking about, if there is an issue, how are you going to resolve it? How are you going to patch it up? Are damages, and what is the role of damages? What is the role of, in-kind performance? How do we make people whole if there is a breach that the technology does on you personally, or physically, or virtually, in your virtual persona. And I'm not sure, we haven't really discussed this, but do we have a second set of rights of us when we perform virtually in the metaverse, for example, at metaverse users, and in the real life? Because there is more and more this dichotomy, of human behaviors that we can see, for example, in the gaming industries versus, the Amazon consumerism of this world. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Like today, you guys have gone really deep. I don't know what you all drank this morning, but guys have gone real deep today, yo. Devon, your takeaway, please.
Let's see. So my takeaway would be for today's discussion, honestly, is build as if regulators are watching, the user is judging, and the exploit is coming, because eventually they are, right? We see too many systems are built for launch, but not for longevity. But real resilience means designing for scrutiny at every level. Build as if a regulator is watching, not just to avoid penalties, but to demonstrate that your house is in order before the subpoena arrives. And build as if the user is judging, because they are, right? The trust is earned not just by what you offer, but how you protect the close, as well as respect. And build as if your exploit is coming, as I mentioned, because it is, whether it's vulnerability or rogue actor or a moment of human error. Risk has a way of testing what you hoped that no one would find. And trust me, I know this. We're no longer, unfortunately, living in the era of move fast and break things later. We're in the era of move with purpose and brace for impact. So the future belongs to the builders. We don't just code smarter, but we govern smarter. And that's what I want everyone to realize.
Thanks, Devon. Palesa, your video has been messing you up today, but you have takeaways from this.
Yeah, I believe it's way much better now. What I actually grabbed in this conversation is that, just like Devon has said that about AI's liability, I was actually thinking that now that we have, or we're aware that, as Basotho, of course, I'm always taking this information home. Now that we're aware that there's struggle to understand where the liability lies when it comes to when AI fails. Now, having blockchain technology being like recording every step of development of AI, I believe that this could actually help in knowing or determine like where does the liability lie, because it will be recording every step of the development of this AI. So one more thing is that I'm realizing that these two incredible technologies can actually help each other to have the best product, thinking of, as my country is just had a draft of AI policy, which is basically focusing on healthcare, mostly healthcare, agriculture, and governance. So I'm thinking that I feel like it's high time that the Lesotho nation try and understand the how blockchain can actually help us in that, having the records of patients, of course, on the blockchain can allow us as Basotho to be in a position to have this massive data, or this vast data of our patients, and be able to maybe develop certain products, possibly maybe let's talk about cancer, be able to like make or create products through, or create solutions through AI, because we already have this vast data that is recorded on blockchain technology. So yeah, basically that's my takeaway. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Palesa. Now, we're just going to allow time for 3 questions. I know people have been dropping messages on the chat. So if you're ready to ask questions, just fire away, because you're really cognizant of time. So if your mic is ready, just fire away if you're ready. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
I have a question. This is Shaved. Hi, hi,
Hey,
Brian.
Javert, Trinidad, big up yourself, man.
Yes. So I do not see in the near future a world where AI and blockchain will be regularized where it benefits society on a whole. I believe I'm not sure, 10 years, 20 years, there will be a period of time that it will be capitalized by the powerful ones, and they will be using it to the advantage as long as possible before any real regulations could take place. And I think the issue is regularization is one of the main things for it to be really full-fledged. I would say legal to say, but using it proper, and having everyone benefit from it the way it's supposed to be. I mean, technology can't be this secret thing that you hide away and only the powers that maybe could tap into it, and at the end of the day, data is, like this guy said, I can't remember his name, he's in the chat, one of the presenters. Data is like oil.
Evan
This
said it.
is, yeah, this is our currency. And to be playing around with it, like, okay, this mastermind group of people could, tabulate it and use it to their advantage, is just wild, and I think regulation is the best and probably the only option to really go forward with it.
Any of the panelists want to respond to that, please? That was a very
Yeah,
good question.
I think you're very on point. And I think, the answer to it would seem to be regulation. But I personally do not believe that regulation will be enough. And I think we can historically tell that, right? In every single instance, whenever there's been some sort of, a good point, case in point, right? And perhaps even, is the war on drugs, right? There's more drugs than ever. So, in my mind, you're right. What's going to happen is that it will be capitalized upon by the most powerful. This is very dog eat dog world, and there's a chance here for a very small group of people to grab enormous amounts of power. Now, the answer to it may seem like regulation, but I think it's actually decentralization. I think it's really about, enabling the individual to have their own, sort of answer to it by having their own artificial intelligence. And it kind of gets into one of the other questions, which was, what does a decentralized artificial intelligence look like? And how does that benefit the individual? And I think when we're talking about that, we're talking about, okay, do we want to hand over all of our oil to these chat GPT corporate folk and Grok and whoever else? Or do we want to instead, have an artificial intelligence that works for us and that we can acquire various algorithms and data through the global information marketplace to enable it to do what we need it to do for us, right? Whether it becomes our doctor, whether it becomes our lawyer, whether it becomes our self-driver, right? Our chauffeur, right? So what that means is that you'll have your own AI that will belong to you. And you'll be able to go and buy on or develop yourself, create, or, if you're a developer, maybe you're just a person that wants to go and collect information, and you'll be able to create that algorithm. You'll be able to sell that algorithm to others, whether it's Tesla, a large corporation that wants to sell their self-driving algorithm so that your AI can purchase that algorithm for you and use that to drive your car, or somebody else creates one and you purchase that and use it, or you create it, or you have your AI created, right? I mean, this is, I think, the answer to that sort of intense sort of feudalistic centralization that we're being faced with right now, the beginning of. And it's the only way. frankly, that I feel we will be able to prevent, who knows how many years of almost a return to the Middle Ages, right, or something of that, like the Dark Ages, where we'll all be serfs and we'll be living at the behest of the king, right? So I think it's about taking taking power into our own hands, taking our own power into our own hands, and having these very powerful tools for us that we own, that work for us.
All right, thanks, Evan. Anybody else want to chime in on that? Sarah, Devon?
Sorry, and I'm gonna chime in there, and I think Evan just brought up so many like things, and I think that I love the underscoring of ownership, and we can have an entire thing on what's the definition of ownership in the digital age. What do we actually own? Who owns what, and how? But to Chevette's point, so I'm gonna bring it down really as an example, right? I live in a province in Canada where we're very progressive in legislating on electronic wills, for example, right? We recognize electronic wills; they are legal and valid in this province. So, you don't need a wet signature. You can have a will made on a computer. And so let's integrate that with an AI, because, doing a will takes what? Will planning, right? It takes sitting down and really figuring out, who's your executor? What do you want to do with your assets? Who do you want to benefit? Do you want to have any donations? What about your Facebook? And what about the data on the cloud? Can you even leave it to somebody else? Can you transfer it? So now you imagine having a chatbot or an AI that does all that planning, that back and forth with you, and helps you to, every step of the way to come up with a full will that it's legal, that represents your intention. And then you upload it to a blockchain so that now it's there, it can be found, it has a timestamp, we know where you made it. So that is a clear example of regulation. So the Will and Estate Succession Act recognizing and embracing a technology in a legal way. Think about real estate. Do you want to transact your plot of land through blockchain? Well, that would make it really transparent, really easy. You can, and not even thinking of Bitcoin, think about, a stable coin. So you take your digital, for example, we don't have it, but imagine a digital Canadian dollars, and now you transact the plot of land through blockchain, and then it gets uploaded onto a digital registry that has the timestamp. That will take away the need for buying title insurance, because now it's there, it's timestamped, it's memorialized. You own it, and it's being passed to so and so, and now they own it. And it's you could have an agent and an agentic system that makes sure that all the step of the way is done and time stamped, and you get a confirmation email that all is gone through. So I can see, again, the integration of a simple, day-to-day, legal system and regulated legal systems, such as real estate transaction, wills and estate, buying and selling, cars, anything that has to do with legal transaction being automated and still being legal. Right? Still being made in a way that, it confirms and it keeps expectations and clarity. So I think it's possible. And I would say keep it very simple, because if you're thinking too much of an abstract, it becomes really unmanageable as a conversation. But if you keep it simple and real life related, then you can see how you can regulate it. And to the decentralization thing that Evan brought up, decentralized doesn't mean not regulated. Decentralized in blockchain terms means regulated by code. Something is being regulated, it's just being automated with a code. So now, yes, there is no trust in an intermediary that it's human, but there is huge trust in the system itself and in code system. You know, code is law. So you would just have to make sure that the codes are right, that we coding it correctly. And that's where the anti-fragility comes in, and the ability to audit that information.
Thank you, Sarah. I have a question for Devon before we move to Katleho and Kabi. So, Devon, in terms of cultural preparedness and how different countries are taking this technology, because I know as a GRC expert, you're always looking at things from a cultural lens and cultural readiness. Is there any aspect to that in this sort of transition that we're experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. We've talked a lot about infrastructure readiness and regulatory alignment, but culture preparedness is the silent make or break factor here, right? Tech doesn't operate in a vacuum. It inherits the values, fears, and blind spots of the culture it deploys into. So if you roll out AI in a society that mistrusts data institutions, you're not launching innovation. You're feeling the resistance, right? If you embed blockchain in systems where transparency is feared rather than embraced, all you build, is a digital theater, right? Nobody's going to really believe that, right? So the tech may be ready, but the people, the leadership, users, communities have to be brought into the process. That's very key. That means educating, not just implementing. So listening, not just scaling, and designing with cultural nuances, not just global assumptions. So culture preparedness is operationally maturity. It's knowing that adoption doesn't just start with the deployment, it starts with the dialogue, and that's key. So
thank you, Devon. And I know that's a discourse we're always discussing amongst ourselves. So I really had to get whether that applies in this sense as well. So we're going to move to Katleho and then Swanello, and then we'll wrap it up because we have 10 minutes for a hard, long stop, okay? So Katleho, you want to unmute yourself, please?
Oh, yes. Greetings, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much for this great presentation. My question was picked basically when Palesa mentioned development basically of basically she did touch on the patients and how we would develop medicines. So I come from a my profession basically has been mostly on medical, pharmaceutical, mostly, and I do understand that it is very critical to use patient data. And if I can recall well, it is one of how do I put this? It is not really allowed. So looking at this whole presentation, the use of AI and decentralizing it, that would mean sharing that kind of data, basically patient data. Yes, it is my dream to like right now I'm under the research and development team. So I would love to actually get hold of certain data, so which would actually help me in my career. But I do know that, unwillingly, it is not really, how do I put this? It is not easy.
Leho, I think I
Yes,
get your question in terms of data usage using these technologies. So, Sarah, you've had various discussions about this data and how it's used, and you know how it's pointed to the IPFS and all that. So probably you could take us through that. And then Evan, using things like ZKPs or a nuanced layer 1, layer 2 blockchain where some of the sensitive data could be hidden within the Merkle trees, and then the ones that are open, to the public. There's always ways of working around it, Katleho. So Sarah and Evan, I know that's within your forte.
Well,
okay.
so
Can I,
yeah.
before you go there, I would like you to basically dwell more on the trustworthiness of the integration of this program in that aspect, and also the data integrity,
Mhm.
Data, if it is not integrated, then it would actually give us wrong. So now, how would we ensure the trustworthiness and the data integrity of the integration of the two systems, basically towards that? If you could dwell more on, the
Okay.
patients and the use of data mostly. Thank you.
Thank you, Katleho.
Yeah. I would actually argue that healthcare data would actually not be put on a decentralized system. It would be like a government owned system, if it's not a hospital owned system. And maybe there could be different systems that could somehow, maybe by agentic, other models be connected. And that's for protecting the data. So I can see why, for example, at a government level, all the health data of all the US citizen or the Canadian citizen can be put into a government protected Canadian healthcare system. And then you upload your data to that. And the issue, with that would be anytime you have centralization, you have points of fragility and hacking. But maybe using the technology of the blockchain would help that to make it more secure and more anti-fragile, even though it's still centralized. When it becomes decentralized, then you're opening up and making it a little bit more robust from a hacking perspective. But now you're really giving your data more transparency and more accessibility. Now there are, and this is the beauty of the technology. The technology is incredibly robust and incredibly complex. So as Brian was alluding to, there are ways to actually make the data itself opaque, but keeping the record transparent. Right? So you have a record that is transparent, but then you can actually decide who has access to the underlying data, so to the content. So it's a matter of understanding the technology. It's a matter of understanding how the government would apply the design, and then how decentralized you want the data to be. I think that healthcare data and information is probably one of the most sensitive types of data. So you're starting from the very top of the I would say the top of the iceberg. So that for full decentralization, I think that would be a little bit of a stretch as it is right now. But that's my
Thanks, Sara. Evan, and then we'll take the last question from Swanello.
Yeah, I think it's a big challenge, right? I mean, as someone who's had their data stolen from government databases, very secure government databases before, I am not a big believer in having highly sensitive data being stored in a central location, because it is a big target, right? And one of the benefits of decentralization is you spread that target out and you make it less vulnerable. So from a purely security perspective, it makes more sense to have a decentralized system, and then also from an individual economic sense, as you mentioned, healthcare data is incredibly valuable, right? And so, looking at the American medical system, a very expensive system that, requires the customer to effectively pay, massive amounts of money to receive, very basic healthcare. One would be remiss not to suggest that Americans or people living in such a system would want to have ownership over their medical data and be given the opportunity to perhaps sell or earn by providing their medical data. Considering just how much money is in the healthcare industry, it would make sense that data being oil, that if you were producing the oil, that you would get paid for it. And your data is your oil, right? So yeah, it's a bit of an out there approach, right? Obviously, I'm not coming from this, in a conservative, traditional aspect, maybe a bit of a decentralize all the things perspective, and that's because, that's I consider myself a futurist, right? I'm looking to go kind of push the limits on what's possible here. And I think in the case of, mass medical research, it does pose a significant problem.
Yeah.
To have, all the healthcare data decentralized and owned by the patient, right? It does make it harder to obtain the data that you would need to do the research and produce the medications, or, create some sort of healthcare strategies. There's definitely challenges to that. So,
Right.
that's kind of what I would say is, okay, you're looking at a whole new paradigm in how it could be done. And if you're able to answer it, it'll be worth billions of dollars.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, if you want me to give you the answer, you're gonna have to pay.
Thanks, Evan. Now, Devon, from a GRC perspective, do you have anything to chime in on that? Guys, we have like literally 3 minutes tops to go, and we have to take the last 2 questions.
No, I mean, I think all the points that were made are extremely valid, and I support it because I work in the security space for GRC. And when it comes to data, having it sit in just one area keeps me up at night. I mean, there's so many breaches that continues to occur within the US and beyond as a result of that. So, I think not Matt's, but Evan's point of view, his futuristic point of view, I think is where we need to head when it comes to data protection, honestly, because it's so many frequent cases that we have seen as a result of these hackers being sophisticated. Because one thing that we haven't talked about, right, is this, and I said this in a conference recently, that we have these hacker organizations that used to at one point, let's say 5 years ago, work in a silo capacity, but now due to the capability of AI, they're working their whole enterprise by themselves, right? They're programming it to be very sophisticated to be able to exploit all these centralized locations where this data is kept. And they're continuing to evolve with how the technology is evolving. So because these hackers are evolving, we need to do our job to evolve, and that's focused on the future. So
Cool. Thanks, Devon. Now, Sonello and Annalise, I'm gonna take your questions together, yeah? So Sonello, because probably they have overlaps and whatever. So Sonello, do you just want to take us through your question, and then Annalise, you can take us through your question as well?
Okay, thank you. Greetings, everybody. I think mine comes off as a token of appreciation or gratitude to you guys for like hosting this. Honestly, really appreciate that, especially Palesa, because I actually saw I actually joined this from Facebook, right? From Lesotho, and last year, my final year project, I was developing a voting system backed by blockchain. So to avoid the interaction and the integrity in the blockchain voting and all that. So it just shows me that we are being right here in this circle just shows me that our dreams are valid and everything. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. That's all. Thank you very much,
Thank
guys.
you. Thank you, Sonello. Yo, it's such things that just make us keep doing this, It's
Yeah.
such a blessing. Thank you so much, yeah?
Yeah, thank you.
All right,
And I'm
cool.
happy to hear you have a blockchain voting. Yeah, I think that's, super important.
Yeah, thank you.
Get
Thank you so
voting on the
much, man.
blockchain.
Annalise, with the last question for the day.
Hi, good morning. I would like to see. Yeah, I'm not so sure with the time. My name is Annalise Thom. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago.
Hey,
And
Tree Wagwan.
wow. My question is because I was having a conversation with Chevette, and with our there's a new government change, right? And the president essentially in her address would have pleaded to the new government to get started on AI regulation. And my question is, as a country who usually plays catch up when it comes to these technology globally and whatnot, what should be, the first target of regulation, and not just for like Trinidad and Tobago, but for any country seeking to regulate AI, because it's such a multifaceted technology. Where do you really begin in starting to, make make order? If you catch what I'm saying. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
that's my
proper catch what you're saying. So, Sarah, this is basically you as the legal head here, and then Devon with the GRC, and Evan with his technical aspects.
So I think that in general, right now, we are seeing two types of regulation posture. One is risk-based and one is technology-based. So I'm giving you the two that, the two examples are, the AI regulation out of Europe, which is risk-based, and it's really the risk to the human data and to the human rights. And then the other one would be the Delaware, Wyoming type of take, that it's looking at how do you integrate and make the technology speak legalese, basically, right? So they have regulation of DAOs through the recognition that this organization exists, and then they basically are embracing the technology and putting it into a legal structure. So for example, DAOs are regulated as general partnerships. So they use what the legal structures that of the vanilla common law, and then they try to describe the technological community within legal parameters, right? So a DAO that is regulated like a general partnership, a LAO is a DAO that can be registered as a limited liability, or they have, DUNAs or decentralized nonprofit organizations, and so on and so forth, right? So you take what you have in your common law and you put the, overall legal structure on top of the decentralized stuff, or you take it a risk approach and you look at it, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, how much risk does this technology poses, and then how should we regulate it? And that would be the European spectrum. Any other government is kind of somewhere in between. In Canada, we don't have regulation yet. We've been having a few false starts. And the good thing that I can tell you we did here, even though it's still nascent, is we had public consultations, and those are really used in England as well. And so you ask the public, how are you using the technology? You do kind of a pulse check, and where do you see regulation? What would be most useful? What kind of incidents would trigger lawsuits and enforcement? And then you have the technologists participating as well to how to form the regulation. So that kind of public say to help the government to find the right balance. So maybe Devon can.
Thank you, Sarah. Devon, and then Evan, and we close off the session.
I say one thing for sure that we want to keep an eye on is how Abu Dhabi has basically put their foot out there with the AI policy. They're actively implementing AI policy basically aimed at transforming into the world's first fully AI-powered government by 2027. And this objective plan is to evolve basically AED's 13 billion in investment for digital infrastructure and solutions. This strategy basically is going to aim to create a robust digital infrastructure, creating a flexible and scalable foundation to achieve 100% adoption of sovereign cloud computing for government operations. The reason why this is key is because the way they're structuring it is in a very compliant but yet agile way, right? They recognize that the technology where it is today, and they're integrating the policy and regulations within that particular space. Because so often what I've seen is that a policy or regulation is created, but it's very bare bones, it's very black and white. And before you know it, they're having to update that regulation the next year, or they're having to do this. So I'm really watching this particular policy closely, because I guarantee you, whatever they implement, a lot of other countries are going to follow. So I think that's the mind frame we want to get. Speaking from a risk and compliance aspect, you want to have that foundational framework. You want to have the regulations, the controls to help prevent risk from occurring, but you also want to make it fluid enough where you can allow it to breathe on its own and still do what it needs to do in the world of technology. So.
Thank you, Devon. Evan?
Yeah, I mean, where to start with regulations? I think maybe, in my opinion, right, if I'm going to go to a government, I'm going to say, okay, here's what you should do. I would say you should be looking to really be a leader, right, not a follower. And I would say, maybe take a path that is a challenging path, frankly, and one that is more tailored towards the rights and benefits of your citizens, right? So looking at the individual, again, it's always going to come back to me and the individual, and decentralization. I think maybe it's not so much the regulations, but it's more of trying to promote your country as a place where a decentralized artificial intelligence startups, whatnot, can do business. Try to make it so that the individuals can be involved in it. Try to make it centered around the citizen, and benefiting their lives. So it might not necessarily be regulatory. It might be a mix of investment. It might be a mix of just the right rhetoric, and maybe laying the groundwork for what we talked about earlier, which would be artificial intelligence for the masses, right? That's just kind of what I would suggest.
Thank you, Evan. So we have to wrap up the segment right now. And I just want to give a big shout out to everybody who attended. First of all, our Evan, thank you for showing up at 3, 4 a.m. your time. Sara, right now, I guess it's almost 8 a.m. your time. Devon, you're in a different time zone. Palesa, another time zone. Like, I'm so grateful. So big up everybody, and big up all the members of the audience. Like, this session was literally one of our most insightful. Like, we always have insightful sessions, but today, guys drank that elixir of deepness, of deep thought, and that's what they did. So we're really grateful. And Palesa, thank you for organizing this session. Like, without you, this session wouldn't have been possible. And thank you for bringing the Lesotho community to our community. And this was supposed to be a hybrid event, but you still pulled it off, despite there being a holiday. And we are incredibly grateful. So I just wanted to let you know that this series, known as the Phi.Nomenon Series, is moving into real life training sessions and events and pop-up sessions, and it's limited to to a few people. It's not one of our mass sessions, so these sessions are invite only. So if you're in this session, like, we thank you for accepting our invitation, and for acknowledging where we are trying to push knowledge in this Web3 and AI journey. So thank you very much, and we shall see you next month. Again, follow our LinkedIn pages, and there's always good information posted out there. And if you need any help or any questions you have, just inbox any member of our team, and we shall be happy to help you. So have a fantastic day. And